All right, well, thank you so much for making the time to chat with me. I really wanted to start off by getting a sense of how you became a writer. What were your initial inspirations for poetry and writing in general?
Yeah, so when I was about 10 years old, my father bought me a student harmony model guitar. He was a big fan of Peter, Paul, and Mary and the Kingston Trio and the folk scene back then. And he thought he'd buy that for me, and I'd become a folk singer and whatever. But from that point on, music and song were a big part of my life. Have never gone away. Um, but when it comes to poetry in particular, when I was in undergraduate school at University of Cincinnati, a girlfriend suggested that I take some creative writing and workshop courses with her. University of Cincinnati's got an excellent collection of contemporary poetry, the Elliston Poetry Room in their library, and they've got a pretty good staff. And I thought it might help with my lyric writing back then. It kind of did and kind of didn't, but from that point on, I was hooked on poetry.
That's awesome. And what about poetry drew you to it so much?
I would say the possibilities, and also, trying to write song lyrics. They can be a little, what can I say, light, not quite as dense. They don't have to stand on their own. They can lean on the band, so to speak, and
Mhm.
even rhythmically, it's a little different. And I just found the whole world of poetry fascinating, and kind of at that point started to dive in.
Mm. Do you have any favorite poets that come to mind?
Well, sure. Obviously, for me, W.S. Merwin was a big influence on me and one of my favorite poets. I've got two bookshelves full of Merwin stuff. EKU, the Japanese, haiku artist, is one of my favorites. All the haiku writers out of Japan are some of my favorites. And then one book that had an influence on me and poet is a Zbigniew Herbert, Polish poet. He's written some really cool stuff, and I lived with his books for a few years. So I'd say, of course, my teachers at Washington University were some of my favorites. Mona Van Dyne was like a grandma to me and to the other guys in the program, the other people in the program. And also Howard Nemroff, even though he was a bit crusty, in his older years there, he was a great influence for us too.
And you teach, right?
I do. I teach a couple Merwin courses at the Lindenwood University MFA program.
Yeah.
To tell you the truth, yeah.
And how long have you been teaching for?
I've only been teaching about 5 years. Prior to that, I worked in the marketing communications field. I owned my own company here in the St. Louis region, and uh, made my money that way. And I still do a little bit of work, but kind of retired. The company closed down, and kind of moved into teaching part time. So
Hmm,
it's fun. It's a lot of fun.
great. I'd love to chat a bit about the poems that we're going to be publishing in the next issue of Archetype.
Okay.
I'd love to know a bit about sort of where they came from. And if you want to describe to the people listening what the poems are about, that'd be great.
Okay. Well, let's see. First of all, the poems that you guys have so graciously decided to publish are from a series that I've been working on called The Invisible Runner. And it's a series that's kind of building itself into a volume, I hope. But the start of the series was a poem about a childhood baseball game. We had a sand lot near our apartment complex back in the day, and if we didn't have enough players to play, full squads on each team, maybe we had 4 and 4 and 5 and 5. We would, if someone got a hit and got on base, we would conjure up an invisible runner that would run so that whoever got the hit can then go and catch or do whatever else was necessary to keep the game going. So it was kind of a way that we bent the rules to, for the good of the game, to keep it going.
Mm.
What I've noticed is that if I started writing these poems, the invisible runner, it became a character. He became a character with a different point of view than I had, kind of a few degrees off. And he references me and the reader in the second person, while these kind of telling my stories or stories that were revolved around, what I was doing when I was growing up. Now, this has now evolved to what I was doing midlife, and what I'm doing now is older. So the invisible runner is a character that's kind of become a shadow. And when I think of shadows, I'm pretty basic. I think the first thing I think of is the darker spot on the ground where it's still light enough to see what's going on there, what's there. And also, when I reference to the runner as a shadow, it's kind of like a friend. I think of the Nielsen song, "Me and My Shadow." But after looking at your journal, your very cool journal that has the title Archetype, and that seems to be some of the driver behind it, I realized that the invisible runner might serve as a Jungian shadow too. Now, I am no expert in Jungian psychology or literary criticism. Yeah, so I don't really know what I'm talking about. But I think one of the things that was interesting to me was that it has to do with looking at the self, projecting the self on a character, and that's kind of what happens in Invisible Runner. But I think more of what happens is that it's about looking at, instead of the self, it's looking at the external events in history, the river of reality that flows over us all, that can sometimes drown us or blind us when we're young, or even when we're older. And I think that the Invisible Runner is kind of looking at that reality and how that kind of makes the self as well. So that's my shadow story. But one other thing I want to bring up, if I'm not going on too long here, is there's an interesting thing in astronomy, amateur astronomy, I guess, called averted vision. And that's when, and it's kind of cool, I tried it, but that's when, if you're looking at a dim star, you can't really see it. If you move your vision angle maybe a few degrees one way or the other, but keep trying to see the star, all of a sudden the star will appear. And that's biologically, that's because we don't have as many vision cells in the middle of our eye as we do on the side. So if we look away, apparently that's why it happens, and it kind of works. I think the Invisible Runner is looking at my reality and the reality of when I grew up, just from a little bit of a different angle than I look at it. And therefore, I think for me and for the reader, we might be able to see things that we wouldn't see if we were looking at it straight on.
Yeah, I love that. I think that makes complete sense, because you're writing about these experiences, and because there's that degree of separation, you definitely get it from a different perspective than if you were describing it from the person's perspective that it's happening to. That makes sense.
Yep.
So yeah, that's a great point. And so does that mean that the poems are a bit autobiographical?
Yes. Yeah. I'll admit that right now, that
Yeah.
to this point, they've all been autobiographical. And I think that I'm probably going to keep it that way. So yeah. Hopefully not boring to the folks that read them.
No, not at all. Any particular reason why you decided to go that route? Have you tried to play with something that's more fictional?
No, I have not gone there yet.
Mm.
I mean, this has been a series that I've been working on for about 9 months, maybe a year, and I'm kind of trying to see it through to its end.
Yeah.
But that's a great question. I mean, yeah, sure. Why wouldn't that work in a different circumstance? I guess maybe it's just that I've discovered it. I've heard of averted vision before and these other things before, but I think I've really discovered it personally through the Invisible Runner.
Yeah.
later on, who knows?
Yeah, absolutely. It's
Yeah.
interesting that it's a very personal process of writing these poems from, your experience, but then also trying to separate like yourself from the narrative of the poetry. It's
Yes.
interesting.
Yeah. Yeah.
So I'm also curious to know what inspires you to write. Do you just write poetry? Do you also write more long form pieces?
Yes, I've working on a series of short stories and a script pilot and a novella that revolve around how can I say it's kind of a utopian theme. It's speculative, it's positive speculative fiction is what I'm interested in doing here. The what if here is what if things work out? What if what if we don't kill ourselves and kill all, and destroy the earth? And what if that happened, and what would that look like? And
Yeah.
that's kind of the long forms I'm working on. So yeah, short story. There's a couple of short stories in the series I've got finished, and a novella that I'm trying to finish up, and then I'm shifting that into some scripts as well to see what goes there. That and poetry and a few song lyrics is about where I'm at.
Okay. What does the world look like if everything works out? Do you have an answer? Are you still working through it?
I don't have an answer yet, but I have some opinions,
Mm,
and that's kind of that's the start of it. I didn't know if you wanted to talk about politics now, but
happy
I'm
to.
on the liberal or progressive side of things, and I think that things can work out if we take some of these progressive ideas, like in our country, from like guys like Bernie Sanders,
Hmm.
and like he says, let's start looking at Canada and Scandinavia and how they do some things. And you guys got a bunch of stuff right that we don't hear,
Yeah.
and that's just the beginning. There's a lot of other things that the imagination brings, and so it's kind of fun. I don't have all the answers right now, but that's kind of the idea. That's kind of the if you talk about what inspires me to write, that discovery
Mm.
of what might be is inspiring me to write that.
And I think it's always good to have that hopeful and optimistic outlook because, the other option isn't fun.
No,
Always feeling despair isn't fun.
no, but it is easy. But it is easier to write a post-apocalyptic piece or a dystopian piece, right? That's
Yeah.
easy. What I'm trying to do is a little harder, right?
Yeah,
That's why
that's
there's
fair.
not that many of them out there, I think. But anyway,
Yeah, that's really fair. I've asked all the questions that are on the list. Not sure if you had anything else you wanted to add, any questions you had for me.
um, golly, no, I don't have any questions now. I'm very impressed with what you guys are doing, and thankful to be a part of it.
No, we
Yeah,
really appreciate you submitting to us, and we're really excited to publish your work in the next issue.
cool.
Yeah, thank you so much for chatting with me today.
All right, good to see you.
You too.
Go Blue Jays! Go Blue Jays! Go
Go Blue
Cardinals!
Jays.